Hey friends, welcome back to Jardin Autoworks. If you like working on cars and trucks, if you like looking at cars and trucks, if you like doing fabrication and modification, you have come to the right place. Today we're going to be working on a 2012 Dodge Avenger. We're going to be putting on some front struts. So let's get to it. What we found was the Duralast fully loaded struts for the front, and just a couple of bolts and they fall right out basically. So they're super easy. If you're just buying the strut itself without the spring or the upper bushing mount, if you've got a spring compressor, that's great because you're going to need it. But if you don't have one, you're going to need a strut spring compressor so you can compress the spring, because you don't want to zip off the nut holding the top of the strut to the mount bushing. That spring, that coil spring, is under a lot of pressure. If you just zip that off, it's going to come out and get you. And please do not do that. Okay, that spring has to be compressed before you can take that upper nut off of the mount bushing. Otherwise, you could really hurt yourself very badly. So, and I don't want that to happen. No job is worth getting hurt. If you're going to do it that way, please check out other videos on how to compress the strut spring before you take the spring apart. Just so that you're kind of aware of what may happen, what might happen, and what you're supposed to do to not make that happen. My advice is that if you don't have a strut spring compressor or have access to one, buy the fully loaded struts and don't even deal with trying to compress the spring. It's not worth buying the tool if you're only going to use it on that one job. The tool can be kind of expensive, so buy the fully loaded one instead, and just mount it into the car yourself. Okay, we've got the car up on jack stands and the tire off. So what we want to do here first, before we really start getting into anything, is just double checking, doing the safety checks, making sure that all the bracketry and everything looks solid and is in place. What you'll notice on this particular bracket here, this is the brake line, is that for some reason, to me, this bracket, it's holding the line like it should, but it just feels tight. It doesn't look bent at all. The hose doesn't look like it's moved back and forth in the bracket. So I guess from the factory, and I double checked the other side as well, from the factory, it's just, it just looks like it has just a really hard bend around that end of the bracket there. So, but anyway, everything looks good. There's no leaks that I can see. All of the clips and everything look like they're in good shape, and the strut rod looks like it's in good shape. The boot is not broken. The tie rod end, what we can see, the boot is not broken, and the boot for the axle looks like it's in good shape on both ends. What we can see of that upper end in there. The caliper and the brake pads. The brake pads have this inspection port. The brake pads, we just did those not too long ago. You can see that there's plenty of inboard pad. Probably kind of dark, but sorry about that. I believe we are good to go to start taking this thing down and getting this strut out of here. Let's start with 13mm bolts right here on the bracket, and then we will pull this this keeper for the speed sensor, and then we'll work on the strut rod. This connection right there, that's a 15mm bolt. And then we've got 21s here on the steering knuckle. Both the nut and the bolt head are 21s. You've got two of them. Put the new strut back in place best you can, and then as soon as you can, go get it aligned. That way you're not eating your tires when it's not necessary. Anyway, let's get to it. Okay, we're going to start with the two 13mm bolts holding these brackets on, and get those off of the tab off the strut here. Okay, don't lose those bolts. Set those off to the side, and we'll pull these brackets off. Okay, we'll just set those off to the side. Now we'll loosen the strut rod bolt, which is up here on this tab. So what we need to do there is there's an Allen head insert right here on the head of the stud, and we'll get a 15mm end wrench. So what we'll do is we'll hold the stud with the Allen head and we'll twist the 15mm end wrench. It is a 5mm Allen head here, and we are gonna see if we can't get that loose. Okay, just push that strut rod back through, get it out of the way, and then what we'll do is we will get the steering knuckle disconnected. And again, you are 21mm, both the head and the nut, and if you have an impact, that's it's going to help you out here. It's going to make things a little quicker anyway. And the bottom one. I forgot on these bolts here, they have a knurled edge on the head of the bolt here. So what happens is when these bolts get tightened up, that knurled part of the shank goes into the steering knuckle and just it holds it solid, so that this bolt does not move, it doesn't twist, so that if there's something going on with maybe the nut wasn't tight enough or something, this bolt is just not spinning in there and working itself loose. So what we've got to do is now we have to get a punch and a hammer and drive these things backwards and get it past that knurled edge on both of them. Okay, there's that knurled edge that we talked about there. So we're going to set those off to the side. We'll get this other one out, or at least started backwards, so that when we take the nuts off of the top of the strut on the strut tower, this thing is ready to come out. On top here we have some 15mm bolts, and so we're just going to loosen these guys up. Then we can get on it with the electric ratchet. We're not going to take this last one all the way out just yet. Maybe we can't do that with that. So you're dead? Probably. Alright, before we get the strut all the way out of there, we want to just open the box and just make sure that the parts are right here. We got the Duralast struts from AutoZone, and they were fully loaded. So let's just check them out here. As we were looking at the driver's side, we had this tab here for our strut rod, and then on this side we had the connections for all the brackets. So I believe that this is going to work out just fine. On the top, what we've got is we have new strut tower bushing, new spring, and it is nicely painted. New bushings, rubber bushings on the bottom here for the spring. So as a fully loaded unit, we're going to put it back up into the car with our steering knuckle mount pointed out. I think everything's good to go. We are going to get back over on the strut and drop the last two bolts, and then we'll put this guy right back up in there. Here we want to make sure and kind of hold the steering knuckle up just so that it takes the pressure off of this bottom bolt here. And you can see when the pressure is released on that bolt. So once the pressure is released on the bolt, take the bolt all the way out, and the steering knuckle and all of its components will rest on that lower control arm, no big deal. So we'll set that off to the side, and we'll undo this or top nut on the strut, and we'll drop this old strut out of here. Okay, we've got one remaining nut on the top of the strut. Reach up underneath and grab hold of the strut so that it just doesn't fall out once you loosen that bolt all the way. We'll lift up on the strut slightly so we can get all the pressure off that nut. Take that nut out and then drop it down through the bottom. And then we can just kind of let it hang for just a second while we resituate down below so that we can work this strut out of its hole. So we're going to push back on the bottom to get it away from the steering knuckle. We're going to lift up slightly and then turn it to the side and pull this guy out. We'll do an inspection of this. Okay, so we've got the struts sitting side by side, very similar looking. And then when we look up here at the strut tower bushing, we see that the old one is really starting to crack and just be really nasty compared to the new one. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the nuts off the top of the new one and then take the sticker off of here and then get that up inside the car so we can get done with this job. Okay, so we're going to get the nuts off of here, set those up on the cowl just out of the way, but in range of our being able to grab it. We're also going to take the sticker off the top here just to kind of get it out of the way. I don't know if it's any big deal if it stays on or not, but maybe we just leave it on there but tighten it up against the top of the tower here. We are going to put our bolts up top there and look to see if we're in alignment, and if we are, run those studs up through there. Kind of hang on to everything all at once here and start one of your new nuts on there. Once you have one, you can just kind of let it rest on that nut and then start another one and then let it hang. Get your third nut on the stud. And kind of what you're trying to do is you're trying to keep this so that everything lines up. You want the mounting position for the steering knuckle to be like your tires are pointed going straight down the road. So now that we have the strut tower connected, what we're going to do is we're going to push the strut backwards. We are going to make sure that all the gunk and stuff is out of there. Okay, push the strut backwards, pull the steering knuckle forward slightly, and then spin it so that it goes up in that mounting position. Grab your bolts. I'd have to play around with it just a little bit to get this thing to go. Doesn't matter which one you get started, just as long as you get them started. I got my top one started, so we're going to run that all the way into the knurled edge. So now we're going to get that bottom one, and again you might have to work it slightly, push it back and forth until you can line up that slot, and again push it into the knurled area there. Alright, so now that we have the strut and the steering knuckle semi put together and hanging on each other, we're going to tighten the strut tower bolts. We're going to snug them up here. Now we're going to take our big steering knuckle mounting bolts. We're going to put those on. Now we've got the 21 socket on the impact. We're going to pull the mounting bolts in on the knurled edge. Get your bottom one. From here, we're going to reinstall the mounting bracket for the speed sensor and the brake line. Again, 13mm bolts. Start them in. Put your steering rod back up in there. Screw that on best we can, and then get back on it with the end wrench and our 5mm Allen head. you have a ratcheting box end, that'll probably work better here. If automotive repair like this interests you, make sure and hit that like and subscribe button and ring that bell so you're notified of all new videos when they come out. Let's get back to it. Alright, so we're going to do the inspection here. We're looking at the brake lines here. No leaks, everything's nice and tight. All the bracketry and everything is in good shape. We've got our strut rod. Our strut rod looks like it's in good shape. It's not bent or doing anything funky. We've got our speed sensor line there. All the keepers and everything are looking good, and the bracketry is not bent and looks good as well. 13mm bolts here on the bracketry holding the brake line and the speed sensor. And then a 15mm with a 5mm Allen head on the inside of the stud for holding it when you try and take that off. So one of the things that I found is that you don't need to disconnect this off the steering knuckle, period. Take your 13mm bolt off of there and just pull the bracket down, as well as this bracket here, and get everything out of the way. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to try and do this side a little quicker than the driver's side. So I'm going to put you on the stand and we'll get after it here. 13mm bolts, take out your bracketry here. A 15mm on your strut rod. So it's a combination now, since we got it broken loose. It's going to be a 15mm end wrench on first, and your 5mm Allen head that goes in the center to kind of hold the stud while you're trying to get everything apart here. And you might have to kind of work it back and forth because there's rust that's built up on it. But all it needs to do is just hold it in place. Actually, you could probably now spin it using your ratchet wrench, and basically you're going to spin it in the tightening direction to spin it out of the nut. They are just behind my black toolbox, right by the drill press. They're in a magnetic holder thingy. Okay, got the strut rod out. Don't need to pinch him. Now we're going to take our mounting bolts off of the steering knuckle to the strut. Again, those are 21s. Now we're doing with the end wrench on the head side is just kind of making sure that that bolt doesn't move. I don't anticipate it moving because of the knurled edge on the inside. So we're just gonna, we just got it there just for safekeeping, and we are going to back these bolt nuts off. We're going to take our sledge and our punch and drive those mounting bolts backwards to get them past the knurled edge. Okay, there's one. Okay, we've got the other one out. Now we're going to go up top here and get those 15mm bolts on the strut tower. Okay, just before we get that last nut off of there, we're going to take this bottom bolt out and swing the steering knuckle out of the strut itself. Now we'll take that last nut off the top of the strut tower and get the shock out of there. So make sure and hold on to the strut so it doesn't fall. Take that last nut. And then we're going to drop the shock out of there by kind of angling it towards the back of the car at the bottom and pulling down out of the strut tower. Okay, we're not going to take the sticker all the way off. We're just going to loosen it up and put it against the bell part of the upper housing here. We're going to take the nuts off and set those over to the side so that they're easily reached. And then again, when we go back up in there, we want the steering knuckle mount part to be facing straight out towards us. We're going to run the strut up in the tower, and then we're going to keep up top there just to make sure that we're aligning our studs. Up through their respective holes. And then we're going to put on a nut so that we can let it kind of hang and not be lifting anymore. Start your other two nuts. Just run them down best you can by hand. Okay, now come down below and we are going to pull our steering knuckle out, push our strut backwards so that we can get the steering knuckle in and aligned. We're going to get one of our bolts, and whichever bolt we can get into the hole, that's the one we're going to do. We got the top one. Going to maybe move it around just a little bit. Get it to go all the way in to the knurled area. There we go, just like that. Now we're going to get our bottom one. Again, we might have to push the steering knuckle back and forth to get it to go, but So you might have to move the steering knuckle back and forth to get the bolt in there and aligned with the hole. We're going to stick our mounting bolts, or the nuts on the mounting bolts, and then we are going to get up top and we're going to snug down our 15 millimeter nuts on our strut tower. Now we're going to take our 21s and we are going to tighten the strut to steering knuckle bolts. Get your 21 end wrench on your bolt head, because now it's going to move until that the knurled part is in there. Get your bottom one. And now we're going to torque the steering knuckle to strut bolts. We're going to torque those to 103 foot-pounds. Okay, and we're going to torque the strut tower mounting bolts to 41 foot-pounds. Okay, then we are going to go back together with our bracketry. Whenever possible, you want to start them in by hand so that you don't cross thread them. Okay, we're going to run our strut rod back up in here. So We've got this side put back together, torqued down to 130 foot-pounds for the bolts that hold the strut to the steering knuckle, and 41 foot-pounds for the 3 nuts that hold the strut to the body of the car on the strut tower. We'll put the tire back on this side, and we are done with this side. Okay, and now we're going to torque these wheel lugs to 100 foot-pounds. Alright my friends, hopefully you found that video helpful. If you did, please make sure and hit that like and subscribe button, and we'll see you next time on Jardin Autoworks. Thanks for watching.